Welcome to the Beyond Divorce Embracing Change podcast. My name is Michael Flores, and I will be your host while we explore the complex journey of divorce with empathy, insight, and practical knowledge. Whether you're contemplating separation, in a divorce, or looking for support post-divorce, our episodes provide expert guidance, stories, and strategies to help you through every step of the process. We are actual therapists, helping clients who sit on our couches every day through their difficulties of divorce. You are not alone. Join us as we delve in and find solutions that give you hope again. We're glad you're here.
This podcast is not intended to replace legal or personal help. This podcast is for informational purposes only.
Well, welcome to 2025. Oh, we're in 2025
already.
We're there. So welcome to 2025, everyone. Thank you again for being back with us. For those rejoining, those of you that are new in 2025, a great way to start the new year, to just get people moving through this process. We hope that you'll continue to subscribe for those that have, and we hope that those of you who haven't will consider doing that, especially after today's episode, which I think is super important.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes. And please leave a review while you're there. We'd love to have some feedback from you and get a review from you all. January is dubbed as the divorce month. Did you know that?
I did. I heard that.
You heard that. Okay.
Yes.
This is Dr. Jacobie Robinson with us today. And the divorce month of January, so people are kind of getting in the thick of it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's theories floating around of why January, new year, new me, maybe.
Absolutely.
I don't know if how people approach it.
A whole lot of personal thoughts are running through my mind. So I've shared this in podcasts before that my parents were divorced when I was 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen wonderful marriages, and I have seen marriages struggle. Right. And I can't tell you the number of times. I'm just going to say that there's one marriage in particular. I'm not going to name whose marriage it is, but there was one marriage in particular that I watched for many years. And I can't tell you the number of times, at least 6, maybe 7 times I heard this statement. I can't wait till the first of the year. I'm filing for my divorce.
You heard that.
I heard that statement, and it was a different year each time they said it.
Goodness gracious. Well, we're in a year. I guess we're going to see how that trend is going. There's also 2 more months, though.
Yeah.
There's also the months of March and August.
Sure.
That seem to be pivotal months. Maybe we have the spring break coming, and we have the school year's about to start. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what those are significant areas in those months, but I don't really. That's theorized. I don't have enough information to know why those months are so significant.
Well, the reality of it is, for the topic that we're talking about today, the grief cycle, emphasis on that cycle piece, right, is that I believe that we live more in cycle and stages and phases than we realize. That's why we see certain things at certain time of the year.
Interesting.
Certain things at certain times of the day.
So we have seasons of our life.
Seasons of our life.
And it's cyclical.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly.
Love it. Well, let's get into the first part of this, Jacobie, for people. I think they want to know, what is the grief cycle? Some people have heard it.
Yeah.
Don't recognize that there's stages. They actually have an order.
Right.
So maybe we can go through, there's 5 that I know of, right? I think some people add a 6th, but for Dr. Kubler-Ross's research, my understanding when I was trained in this was there's 5 stages.
Sure.
Can you go through those for us?
Yeah. So the first stage is shock and denial, which actually makes sense because this is the moment where you're encountering the information of this loss,
right,
that you're about to experience, right? That the loss has occurred, but your experience of the loss, you're becoming aware, right?
Experience of the loss. So it starts with the shock and denial stage.
Shock and denial. Like, say for instance, whenever people think of grief, they immediately think of death. Somebody died, the loss of a loved one, right? And so if we use that analogy for a moment, if a person is at work and they're doing their job and they're having a wonderful day, and while they were doing that, their loved one, God forbid, was in an accident, right? And that loss has occurred, but they're not aware of that. They're not experiencing that.
Well, and I think for the people that they don't realize in divorce is that the loss they're about to go through or they're going through in shock and denial, the first stage, is probably when they get served.
Exactly.
And it's the death of the marriage,
Right.
the beginning of the death of a marriage, right? So the shock and denial hits right at that moment when they get served, I think. And it's usually because people don't realize when people are going through divorce, sometimes they've discussed it, they've made this decision together, but you're still going through that process.
Right.
But for most, it seems there's a filing that's done. So you have this person who's filing a petition for divorce or petitioning for divorce. A person's being served with divorce.
Absolutely.
Hey, by the way, you're getting divorced. And you're like, hold on, wait, my world's about to change. So step one, shock and deny.
Shock and denial.
That's how that plays out.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. What comes after that?
So then after that, you get angry.
Anger.
And so,
Is anger a primary or secondary? I already know, but I want you to.
of course, anger is secondary. That's why it's number 2.
It's number 2.
It's number 2.
Got it.
Because it is the response to an unwanted feeling.
Mm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So anger is typically secondary. Most often than not, anger is secondary. Somebody felt something else prior to feeling anger. They felt pain. They felt loneliness. They felt rejection.
Fear.
They felt fear.
Yeah.
Right. And people even get angry sometimes in response to joy.
I think I've seen that in teens.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Interesting.
Absolutely. But that's topic.
Okay. Yeah. We're in the group cycle.
So yeah, anger is secondary because it's that statement of it's the emotional response to injustice. This is unfair.
Ooh,
Right.
I believe it's unfair.
Yeah.
Fear, what's
Right.
coming next.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a loss. Anger just comes out in so many different
It
ways.
comes out in so many different ways.
Okay. So stage 1, shock, denial. Now we're in stage 2, we're in anger. We move from anger to what?
Now we're at bargaining.
Bargaining, stage 3.
Yes.
What does that mean, bargaining?
Bargaining meaning that now I'm contemplating what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm contemplating what happened, because I don't want to experience this, or sometimes I just don't want to experience this way,
Right.
then I'm trying to explore how we can do it differently, what you could have done differently, what I could do differently, so that I don't have to go through this. I want to make this discomfort, this dis-ease go away or feel better.
Do you suppose in bargaining, this is where people might want to attempt a reconciliation with their spouse?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So they're like, hey, let's not do this divorce thing. I know you filed, but we can talk through it. Let's go to counseling.
Right.
They start offering all these things to how to solve it, right?
Absolutely.
Let's go to counseling. Let's go to the church. Let's talk to your parents. Let's talk to my parents. Let's talk to the family. It almost seems as if that's the stage where I see people presenting all these potential solutions, but they're all aimed at preservation.
How is this going to affect the kids?
Could that be an example of bargaining?
That's an example of bargaining.
You're not considering the children.
You're not considering the children. How is this going to affect the kids?
But then they call it, I'm being manipulated.
Well, you still in bargain.
Do you suppose bargaining comes out as manipulation?
It can't.
You know what I think that should be changed to then?
What do you think it should be changed?
Negotiation.
Negotiation?
Because if you say to someone, they're bargaining with me, that has a negative connotation.
Sure.
It's like you're wanting something for whatever, right? If you say they're manipulating because they're trying to get a resolution, but they want things to stay the same, they're really negotiating.
Right.
Have you considered the kids? Have you considered, right, there's another loss
Right.
that could be happening. I don't know. I just wonder if we change that to negotiate.
Well, the reality of it is, in my opinion, is that people will choose whatever word works for them for what they're trying to do.
I guess I was trained as a counselor, so
Yeah.
I don't bargain. I guess I negotiate.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reality of it is that negotiation is something that should happen anyway in this process.
There you go. Do you think it would work better if both parties were in the same stage at the same time?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I think the reality of it is that each party will encounter each stage differently, or they can encounter it differently. So if you're encountering this anger stage with a level of petting and immaturity,
We don't see that.
Right. And I'm encountering this anger stage from a place of understanding, but I'm owning my anger. We're probably not going to collaborate very well.
Okay, we're going to get into that deeper because that's really important to talk about how this plays out in the divorce relationship.
Sure.
Okay, so we have that. What is stage 4?
Stage 4 is going to be sadness.
Sadness. Okay, so you're saying in stage 4, so it's interesting. It's not like part of the first or second or even third stage.
Right.
There's 5 stages, and the 4th stage is sadness.
Sadness. The reason why I think the 4th stage, it makes sense to me that the 4th stage is sadness after bargaining, is because in that process of bargaining or negotiating, that I am becoming more aware of what has happened.
You're seeing that transition of that law.
I am seeing the translation of the law.
Interesting.
I am starting to experience the loss. All right.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And what is the 5th stage?
And then that 5th stage is acceptance.
Well, how does that play out?
That plays out in me recognizing that this loss has occurred, right? And not only has the loss occurred, I am beginning to accept my thoughts and my feelings in response to the loss.
Wow. Okay. And I also wonder if there's a layer of acceptance built into this is what we're doing. This is what we're having to do now.
Yes.
Yeah. It's almost like we're going to have to work on this new normal.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, in acceptance is that phase where I begin to strategize. Like, so from a solution-focused approach, I might say as a therapist, at this point of your acceptance, what's your best hope for the future?
That's a perfect question.
You know?
Yeah. Because then they can develop that newness of how things could be. And that's why they have to grieve what was.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had a guy say this once. He was in a very significant relationship. I think he thought he was going to marry this woman.
Sure.
And anyway, he comes in and he's struggling because she is wanting to move on. She's breaking up with him. And so he's coming to counseling. He's in a really bad place. Pretty much he was going through the grief cycle. He came to me somewhere between bargaining and sadness. Like he was in between those because the conversation was regarding bargaining and then moving into some sadness. And so you could see this transition back and forth. But anyway, long story short, what's really interesting is as we worked through it and I was asking those wonderful calibrated questions, he gets to a certain place in the conversation in therapy where he says, I've realized what I'm struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with the fact that the relationship is over and we need to move on from one another. I'm okay with that. I've accepted it. Where I struggle is accepting what could have been. That one got me.
So is it accepting the loss of what could have been?
Yes.
Yes.
Because he envisioned, so think about our questions, right? Like,
yes,
what are your best hopes for the future? Well, that was something he was developing with this person in the relationship.
Sure.
So his preferred future looked like them in it with him.
You know, Michael, that's the epitome of what we see in therapy when a person say that they're stuck.
Right.
They're stuck because they don't want to let go of what could have been, of what they often will say what should be. And so if in their mind something should be a certain way, they're working overtime to make that happen. And I think that, and we may be getting ahead of ourselves and just say this and then I'll let you redirect us, is that in that process of a person trying to make what should be, they're not thinking about the other person's choice, autonomy, and their ability to have the option to say, but I don't want that though.
So you suppose people, as they go through their grief cycle and divorce, they become very, they love to use the word narcissistic.
They do.
I'm going to move that word out.
Okay.
And I would just say kind of self-preserving.
Sure.
And more selfish in some ways, because they're really thinking about how is this affecting me?
Absolutely.
Right? And it's like how you won't let me move on, or how you're affecting me moving on.
Absolutely.
And the other person's like, well, I don't want to move it on. I want to maintain something, whether it's our relationship, children, you, our family, whatever.
Absolutely.
So we become selfish, I think, in some ways in this process, because it's almost it feels like
Absolutely.
it's almost a self-preservation thing.
I would agree with that. I would add a couple of more words to that we don't necessarily have to unpack right now.
Oh, give me the words.
But it's selfish, self-centered, self-focused, self-indulgent, right? Self-gratifying, right? All based in self, but to a certain degree, they each have a little difference.
They do.
That makes.
But how does it look like to others?
Right.
When someone's acting in that way?
It typically, emphasis on the word typically, tends to look selfish. And selfish has an idea based in not considering someone else.
And then when people look that word up, they're extremely selfish, self-centered.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't consider others.
Right.
What's the word they find?
Narcissist.
Yeah, they find narcissism. Right in the big book, right?
Yeah.
Oh, then they have to be this.
Yeah.
Well, could it be that they're grieving and they're stuck in the process of grief?
You and I know that. Right.
Okay.
Can
we start there?
Right. As therapists, we know that.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to help our audience to understand that things that appear a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that they're that way. So when it appears that a person is coming across as selfish, it could be that they're not necessarily selfish, but perhaps that they're self-persevering.
Yeah.
Or self-focused.
Right.
Right. Because even in grief, a person has to take care of themselves so that they can be well in the place of acceptance.
I think the greatest way to do this when you feel someone is selfish is become curious.
Absolutely.
You learn a lot about what that behavior might mean versus what you think it could mean.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So let's do this. Let's get back into this. Talk about so we have the 5 stages. Let me recap. We have the shock and denial. We have the anger. We have the bargaining or negotiating, as you call it, sadness and acceptance.
Right.
That's in order.
Yeah.
For the listeners and the viewers, what should they expect it to look like?
Yeah.
So like let's just do 5. Let's try to do them quickly.
Sure.
So in shock and denial, what could that look like? How could someone behave in that, in divorce?
Right. So it could vary. It could be when the person receives the news, or they receive, like the analogy that you gave, they were served. They received the notice.
Right. Served. There was a petition.
They could immediately dismiss it. As if it didn't happen, go on with their day as if nothing ever happened, and they're mingling with family, friends, and loved ones, and then it's a by the way mention type thing, right?
Yeah.
Or it could be the opposite end of the spectrum, where it becomes, oh my gosh, my life is over.
Wow. And so how could they? Well, not how, but what might they see in their partner,
right?
Like, or in their ex,
right? So you're asking in terms of the person
they might see in someone else.
Right.
So in themselves, recognize that when you're in shock or denial, you might experience it this way,
right?
But what you might see in your partner,
so in that person, you might see an overemphasis of who they typically are, right? So if a person is typically jovial and kind, they might be more jovial. Overly,
they can increase that.
Then increase that.
Okay.
Or you might see them completely be the opposite of who they are.
So they either become exaggerated more of what they are, who they are, or they swing way to the other side. And most likely, that's what you might see on stage 1.
You don't see a whole lot in the middle, though you can. But oftentimes you're going to see the extremes.
I don't know if I've ever seen a divorce where people ended in I'd say end. I've ever seen a divorce kind of kick off where people are in the middle. They're usually like, whoa. It seems like the extremes are just extremely intense.
And this is the thing, again, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself.
Go ahead.
But this is the thing. is that oftentimes, in many cases, one person has left the divorce long before they filed.
Tell the
Or left the marriage, I'm sorry, has left the marriage.
What does that mean?
And what that means is that a person typically contemplates divorce before they even bring it up to the other person.
Right.
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 And so by the time they're bringing it up, they've contemplated it for a while. Right. And so, I'm thinking of a situation that I had the experience, the opportunity to witness, and the couple brought up the conversation of divorce. One person decided that, okay, it looks like we're going to work on it. We're not going to divorce. The other person brought it up as a point of, I'm informing you that I want a divorce.
I see.
And how that person thought that the information was going is that I'm letting you know that I'm filing, even though those words were not used. But that was that person's intent. So that when the other person received the notice, they were shocked.
Sure. And that's stage one.
Right, because that's stage one. They were completely shocked because that's not what was said to them.
There you go. Then it leads into anger. What does anger look like for them? So we're in stage two now.
Anger looks like, how dare you? After all of this that I've done for you, everything that I've given my life to you.
Can this come from the person who's filing divorce and the person who's receiving?
Absolutely it can. Absolutely.
How dare you?
How dare you? Right. Typically though, see, this is why people can be in different stages at different times.
Right.
Because see, the person who is filing will probably be in shock prior to the filing.
Oh, there you go. Right. That makes sense.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they will be in shock prior to the filing, whether it's the shock of infidelity or the shock of just not being present. You know, the shock comes in response to the expectation or the hope that I had for this relationship not being met.
Got it.
All right.
Got it.
And so, so it can happen with both. And in many instances, the filing can be in response to anger.
So what you're saying is, you might be in a shock stage, I might be in an angry stage, and in my anger stage, I've filed on you, now you're a shock stage. Now we're starting that process over. This is interesting because I've said this before, that a little psychological hack is, if you ever want to know what someone might be feeling or thinking, just think about how they make you feel.
Absolutely.
Because that's probably how you're making them feel.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. In some ways like that. I just think that's extremely helpful when you're not certain what's going on. Why are they treating me this way? Why are they? Well, they might be feeling, whether you're consciously aware of it or not, they're feeling what you're feeling in some way, and they're acting on that. And so anger is one of those things. Let's move into the third one, which would be that negotiation or bargaining stage.
Absolutely.
So how would that, what should the listeners, viewers kind of look out for to say, this is how we know we're in that stage, either from them or from me?
Right. So we talked about a little bit earlier when we talked about things that might be said, things like, how's this going to affect the kids?
Oh, yeah. We did.
We may have talked about things like, this is where the conversation really starts happening.
So this is a conversational stage, usually.
Typically. It can be passive aggressive.
Do you suppose, okay, hold on. Do you think in the anger stage and the shock and denial stage, it's more statements? And maybe in the bargaining negotiation stage, you're going to hear more questions from the person?
I would say typically yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you're getting more questions from don't take offense to the questions, they may be in the stage of bargaining.
Absolutely.
And negotiating, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're getting statements like, how dare you?
Yeah.
Do you not remember how much you treated me like a da-da-da-da? That's a statement. So they might still be in anger stage.
Right.
So maybe look at how they talk to you.
Absolutely.
That might tell you what stage they're in.
Right.
I don't know. What do you think?
I would say so. So like typically what we're seeing in the anger stage are going to be statements of attack.
There you go.
Right. And in the negotiating stage or bargaining, it's going to be statements of curiosity.
Yeah. Even if it's, But you might still see some jabs in there.
Oh, of course.
Instead of power punch, it's a jab.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Because keep in mind, anger has its own set of stages.
Oh, gosh. We better not get into all that.
We won't.
There's like have you noticed there's stage, there's all these little sub-stages.
Yeah.
So that's all right. Okay. Next one would be sadness.
Yeah.
So what kind of things might a person behave like, or how might that play out? What would that look like?
Right.
Either for self or for their other.
Yeah. So you might see a lot of remorse. You might see a lot of sadness.
Is this where the I'm sorries come in?
This is where the I'm sorries come in. This is where of course, like the apologies. This is the stage where you might see one party working extra hard to seek forgiveness.
Right. And I'll say something that's really interesting. So let's say, let's set up a scenario here. I'm in a relationship. I'm mad at my wife.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm hurt. I'm angry, whatever. I decide this marriage isn't going to go forward. I file for divorce.
Yeah.
And my wife is now going through the shock, the anger, everything else. Let's say my wife moves quicker than I do and she gets to sadness.
Yeah.
And I know it could come out in bargaining too, the whole apologies and everything else. But let's say she's in the sadness stage and she says, I'm so sorry. I know I wasn't the wife that you deserved, whatever else. But let's say I'm still stuck in anger. I'm going to respond probably in a very angry place to them.
Of course.
And remember, people will give to you what you give to them, right?
Absolutely.
So I might move them backwards in the grief cycle back to anger.
Sure.
Because now they're like, oh, you're coming at me with anger, so let me, right? And they spew it back. And so some people, I don't think even realize that where you are in the stage, you can actually put an emphasis on your partner to be back in that stage because you have not achieved acceptance.
Absolutely. And this is the thing, right? Is that pendulum can swing or not.
Tell me more about that.
So like the point that you're making, all right, you're in sadness, ex-partner is in anger. And so as you express your sadness, they respond in anger.
Yes.
All right. So either that pendulum can either push you further. Oh yeah, I'm accepting this thing is over. I'm done.
It can move me into the next portion.
It can move you into the next portion.
Or
depending on where the anger came from, it can come around the other way and hit you and push you back to anger. All right. And so like, here I was trying to be kind, trying to be remorseful. And you come with the stupidity. Right.
So let me tell you, this is exactly why we're getting divorced.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Or it could not fade.
Wow.
You can stay in that sadness and you can say, yeah, I deserve that.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So a number of things can happen. Right. And everybody's not the same.
Hit me with some good stuff. I got to make some notes here.
Sure.
So let's go to the last one.
Yeah. So then that's acceptance. That's the point where we have accepted the loss. Right. And I think this is the bigger struggle for most people, no matter what the loss is, but particularly in divorce, this is the biggest struggle, right? Because people typically don't want to accept the identity of being a divorcee.
It's a good point. A lot of people, what I find is with marriage, and I like asking this the more I've gotten into it, is because I've been asked by others about my faith. Sometimes I like asking that question about them. What do they believe about marriage?
Right.
Was marriage something that was supposed to be forever, or was it? We'll give it a shot and we'll try it on. We'll take it for a test drive.
Sure.
Like what were their views? Because sometimes they went into the marriage with completely different views of what that was supposed to look like.
Absolutely. So, I'm thinking about another situation that I had the opportunity to observe.
Mm-hmm.
And in this particular situation, one of the parties said, in fact, it was her, she made the statement, I did not get married just to get divorced.
Wow.
I got married for life.
To them, it was a life decision.
It was a life decision. Right. And oftentimes what that did in that moment, in that conversation that I was having with her, it helped me to understand that in many instances, a divorce is harder to grieve than a death.
You know, you're right. And I think that's what that guy was telling me in that one scenario, where what could have been, because that could have been, that person still exists.
Yeah.
Right. Like in a death, we know they're gone. It's we'll see them maybe in a later life if we believe in God and heaven. We get to see each other again, and we know it's no longer an earthly thing, right? And so I wonder if grief is easier there.
Yeah.
Like it must be much harder to grieve when the person is still present, available. You see them. You might see them get into another relationship and be the happy you wish would have been in yours.
Absolutely.
And then how much that can bother you.
Absolutely. And this is the thing, Michael, is that I'm thinking about another one where she was the one who filed, and she even said this would be different because she felt guilty.
Wow.
She felt guilty.
Is that part of the stage?
Yeah. Well, guilt will probably come in the sadness. Guilt can come in the bargaining. Guilt can come in the anger, right?
So you can play out in any of those
It can play out in any of these stages. And so she was feeling guilty, and she made the statement. She said, this would be a little bit easier if he had just died.
Oh, because she recognized the finality of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's something else. So I want to do this real quick. We're going to finish up real quick. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, Jacobie, you and I could probably talk about this for about 2 hours.
Oh, I'm sure we could.
So let's get into the key takeaways that I took from this.
Yeah.
You got to remember, everyone is not the same.
Right.
Everyone's going through a different part of the cycle and moving at a different pace.
Sure.
So that's something to also keep in mind. So it's almost as it's saying, we'll put a blanket on it. Everyone's going through the grief cycle with divorce because it's like a death. Death is a marriage.
Absolutely.
However, everyone moves differently. Some people move quicker. Some people move slower. Some people can, I don't know if they really skip a stage or as much as just like, I don't need as much time there.
Absolutely.
As they move through it. You can pull or push your ex.
Absolutely.
Like you can be in a different area in the grief cycle than they are. And by your response to them, you can push them in or pull them back from where they are in the process. And that's probably why it feels so cyclical.
Absolutely.
It's like, man, one day they're really nice to me. Another day they're just treating me like they must be bipolar.
Yeah.
We heard that one, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And then you have knowing where you are.
Absolutely.
Like if the best thing people could take away from this is understand the 5 stages,
right?
Know where you are in the process so that you don't get pulled or pushed.
Right.
And you're doing your work through the stage to get there. So almost like depersonalize their response to it.
Sure.
When they're angry, they're going to say some really hurtful things.
Absolutely.
Because they're just telling you they're angry. And you can literally get pulled back into that anger. And now they're saying things that make me angry. And now I'm angry again. And here you are in sadness, almost at that last stage.
Absolutely.
And you got pulled back.
Michael, I want to emphasize that one about knowing where you are. Because at the end of the day, you're only responsible for you. You're not responsible for the other person.
Say that again?
You're only responsible for you. You're not responsible.
But they're
for
doing
the
this to
person.
me.
Even if they're doing it to you. If they're doing it to you.
Oh, if.
What are you going to do about it? You cannot control what they do.
But
you want them to stop. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
You want them to do something differently. I get that. But you're only responsible for what you do.
So there's a formula. I'm actually going to write it down. So those of you viewing this can see it. And it basically is what you just described. I did not come up with this. I heard this first from a guy named Jack Canfield.
Sure.
Okay. And he said there's a formula to decision making.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's this. I'll show the camera. E plus R equals O, which is the idea of event plus response equals outcome.
Yes.
So what that basically means is there's an event. You got a divorce filed on it. You now get to choose how to respond.
Absolutely.
The event plus the response is gonna filter into an outcome.
Absolutely.
So what you do, I've learned, is go backwards.
Yeah.
Go to the outcome you prefer.
Sure.
Then go back to the event of what has occurred. Mm-hmm. So here's what I want. Here's what's happened. Plug in your response.
Yeah.
And then that's how you can determine how to basically facilitate an outcome that you're hoping for. Isn't that neat, a little formula?
And it is very neat. And it goes back to some other podcasts that we've done before where we talked about responding instead of react.
Yes.
And so we need to be careful that when we look at this R, that we don't see this R as a reaction.
And reactions are typically what?
Reactions are typically retaliation.
Right. Based in emotion.
Based in emotion.
Notice the grief cycle has sadness.
Yes.
Anger.
Yeah.
Shock and denial. Those are all feelings, aren't they?
Right. They are. And this is the thing. There's nothing wrong with feeling. It's nothing wrong with emotions. They're there to tell us about us.
There it is.
Right?
Emotions are designed as a signal to tell you where you are in the process.
Absolutely. I'm not supposed to be led by the emotion.
People avoid emotion.
Yes.
Because they don't like the way it feels rather than learning from what it means.
Right. It's the same way as when we're driving and the check engine light comes on.
That's what an emotion is. It's check engine light.
It's a check engine.
Hey, something's up.
Yeah. But how many of us keep driving?
It sounds funny. I bet it's something in the steering column.
Yeah. And this is the thing that I notice. I don't know about you, but my son is getting real close to driving age, or is at driving age. And every once in a while, there's a ding that'll go off on the car. Particularly, what really gets me is the ding that happens when the temperature drops to 39 degrees. My car will ding to let me know that it's cold outside, and so winter awareness. So he's sitting over in the passenger seat, and the car will ding. And he looks over to see what's going on. I said, what are you doing? He says, I want to be pushing the car.
I don't, like he's going to be able to choose at this point.
You know, because like he's concerned about how much gas we have.
Yeah, I heard a ding. What it means?
He's concerned about, is it a low flat tire?
No. Yeah. Like, so if your emotion is a ding, all you got to ask is what it means.
What does it mean?
That's it.
What is it?
That's it. I think we got it.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, I did too.
I love it.
And I think it was one of our shortest.
I'm going to be honest with you. I think it was one of our short. I'm going to keep talking because I don't want it to be the shortest one. No, Jesus. No, I enjoyed it. Thank you, listeners, for being here. Thank you, viewers, for being here. Please follow us on Instagram at Brighter Possibilities FC, Facebook, Brighter Possibilities Family Counseling. We love having you here, and thank you so much for being here. Keep moving forward, everyone.